Was everybody comfortable? Anybody need anything? Perfect. Great. That's success up to this point. So welcome to DataYard. We are glad to have you. This is our first Databites event that we've had, so we appreciate you guys doing the first run with us. This is great. Our topic of the day is FUTUREPROOF 2019, so we're going to be diving into what kind of technology and such is available in firewall specifically that Ryan's going to be touching on. I just want to get out of the way really quick. This is a time for questions. It's a time for good information. That's the whole point of this. It's just for us to be able to give to you guys the best information that we can give. Try to stay vendor agnostic and try not to be salesy. Ryan's going to be doing the talk, and he's a technical guy, so shouldn't have any problems there, and he should be able to handle all your questions. Afterwards, if you have anything you want to follow up on, or if you do want to know how DataYard maybe provides some of these different types of services or something like that, we would be happy to talk with you, but we'll probably just address that at another time. So trying to keep that totally as a separate thing, so this can all just be about good information. I don't think we have anything else, or I have anything else, but otherwise it's all Ryan from here on out. So really quick, bathrooms just around the corner. You go out this door and they're just around the corner, so if you need to step out, that's where they're at. And otherwise, I think we'll let Ryan go ahead and get started.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Jacob.
buddy.
As Jacob said, we'll be talking a little about firewalls today, and this is our first swing, so I ask questions. You know, if you got anything you guys want to know more about, less about, we'll try and stay on topic enough. But anywhere you want to go, let me know. So, quick introduction. So I'm Brian Leslie. I'm network engineer here. I've been here 2.5, coming up on 3 years. I take care of most of the infrastructure, so pretty much any networking you're going to see in the data center, on our network locally, and then all the infrastructure that is going to provide internet connections for our customers. I'm on the infrastructure team, but being a pretty dynamic team, I will do customer stuff. I've gone on site to customers. I've probably worked with some of you guys before on certain specific things. So trying to pull all that experience together and provide some good information here. At DataYard, our biggest thing is we want to take a lot of these technologies and complexities and just make them real human and real for you guys and look to solve your problems in a non-mumbo-jumbo jargon kind of way when we talk to you. So I'll try and keep that in mind when I talk, but if I get too technical, let me know. As Jacob said, this is Lunch and Learn. I want to teach you guys. I'm an engineer. I don't do sales. I want to talk technical stuff, so that's what we're going to do. Trying to keep everything applicable to products you may use. You may buy different things. I have certain experience with different products that I'll kind of filter in as it makes sense, but this is not anything that's tied to a certain year to sell you Cisco kind of stuff. So real basic, you guys all know what a firewall is. Don't be shy if you don't.
Tell us.
So someone want to volunteer to offer a quick explanation what your understanding of firewall is? At a very basic level, firewalls, and I'm going to talk traditional firewalls first, and probably what most of you guys are used to, are just there to basically keep the outside out from your network. So you've got your network, it's where your users will sit, and your servers sit, where your services are all going to sit, and bad guys sit on the outside, whether they're intentionally malicious or not, we want to keep them out. And so, where that kind of comes in is the name came from a firewall in a car. You got something to protect you from the engine catches on fire, it's not getting to the passenger compartment. There's a fire going on outside your network. It's not going to spread into your network and infect your systems and cause damage. It does this in a couple of simple ways, and if you know anything about how data moves over the network, you're basically blocking everything from the outside. Stateful filtering, we call it. It's on the outside, it's going to stay out. Anything on the inside can go out, nothing on the outside can go in. So that's kind of the basics of how that works. There's a couple additional features in traditional firewalls. You guys are familiar with NAT. A lot of flavors of NAT, basically just a way that we go and can conserve IP addressing. VPN technologies, you've probably all heard of VPN technologies, allow people from the outside to kind of connect and tunnel to your network in different places. Those are all things that a firewall traditionally provides. Hopefully you have a firewall on your network today. Hopefully you manage it and do things with it. As a quick aside, has anybody ever just plugged their computer into a raw open connection on the network? You have an internet connection coming in from Spectrum or whoever your provider is, and you just hook up with no firewall and just watch what happens? No? Well, I did it this morning. It's kind of fun to do. I've done it a couple times. I can show you right here. So if you look at this packet capture, there's a lot of stuff going on. The internet has a lot of stuff going on raw. You guys listen to the news, right? I just read a story with SEC was hacked in a couple of ways. We'll talk about that later, but people want to get into your systems. People just want to scan your systems, and maybe they, aren't even malicious in their intent. They just are playing around, and there's a lot of traffic out there. So if you look at
Brian, can you zoom in on that just a
Yeah.
little bit so we can see it's kind of small?
So the one thing that's tricky to do is your computers are chatty anyway, but if you start looking at some of these IPs here, so this is the IP address, and these are the ones coming from, right, so this category would be, this is coming from the outside and this is coming to me. That IP address, if I go on and look at who owns that, because that's not a connection I started, right? It doesn't start with me, this is the first packet in that sequence. If you go and look up those IP addresses, where they come from, you can go to Aaron's database. They're going to be from different countries. I found some from Europe. I shouldn't be talking Europe. I found some from Asia in here. So probably this capture probably was run over 30 seconds, and there's probably half a dozen communications started here. I plugged into a raw connection from the internet, that we have, and probably got half a dozen connections from Latin America, Europe, Asia. I didn't start these connections. There's not a stream. Someone's just dumping data on my computer trying to do something. So that's kind of at a high level of what's bad that's going out there, that why we want to put some kind of protection, some layer in to help us. Questions so far? All right. All right, so what I just talked about was traditional firewalls. That technology has been out for decades, right? This is the stuff that you're going to go and probably have ASA 5500s, whatever things you can probably go to Best Buy. People go to Best Buy anymore and buy stuff? And wherever you're going to go and buy, Amazon Prime, your generic, off the shelf kind of stateful firewall. Probably most of the home routers are basically built like this inside. Very, very simple stateful protection. And that's the traditional firewall, and that's what really a lot of businesses still have today as their firewall. But they don't have everything you need. So there's a lot of stuff, because this is a very evolving world, and security is a hot topic, right? I don't think anybody would doubt security is quite a hot topic right now. And when we go look at all the stuff that's happening in the world, it's kind of been a cat and mouse game, right? Bad guys are evolving their technology, they're getting better and better at what they do. There's more stuff coming out, more vulnerabilities being exposed quicker and quicker. We gotta do more. We wanna protect ourselves more than that traditional firewall can do. And one of the biggest things that I think, aside from the feature, I think the biggest things that we add when we go to the next generation firewalls, as we'll call them, as we'll talk about them right now, is visibility and features. And we'll talk about the features here in a minute, but a lot of that is provided by that visibility, because what you don't see may be what hurts you. And what you don't know is happening, you can't do anything about it. And so a lot of the traditional firewalls we've managed here, when I would go in and I'd get a customer call, hey, something's going on, hey, we need to go look at something, hey, can you provide a report? You know what I'm doing? I'm going in and I'm dumping a packet capture, I'm dumping a connection log, and it's all in command line, all these entries, and all it knows is IP port, IP port, IP port, IP port. How do you make sense of that? How do you know how much data you're pulling? You might have some Databites on there. We've been creative. We've created some scripts in the past that will go and take that small snapshot, that small piece of data, crunch it in, and provide us something that says, hey, this is all coming from Microsoft Windows updates data. Hey, this is all somebody going to Netflix. But that's kind of hard to do, and that only gives you a small piece snapshot in time. So that's one of the downfalls of that traditional world. So, talking about next gen, right? I said next gen firewalls. That's the buzzword. You guys have all heard that, right? Most of you have heard next gen firewalls. Well, I think it's a misnomer, because if you go out today to any commercial firewall and buy something, Cisco, Juniper, Fortinet, Checkpoint, they have all these features in them. So really, next gen is current gen. It's going to be hard pressed to find a brand new off-the-shelf firewall from a big vendor that you're going to be able to buy. Hey, you can tell me if you guys have seen them, but you go to every site and all they're doing is telling you, here's all the features we've got, and they've all got a lot of cutting-edge features. And so, if you did put a firewall in the past year or two that's new, you probably have it next gen already, whether you're using it or not. If you haven't touched your firewall in 5-10 years, you probably don't. So I'd say most of these are what you're going to get if you want to roll your own, per se. And I like open source. We're an open source shop, and for a lot of things we do, if you can go take some project that somebody else has built and offering for free and download it and put the effort into tweak it and tune it and kind of be part of that community, you can do this without money. Because everybody knows buying network equipment is expensive, not only to buy the hardware, but to buy the support and the licensing and all that stuff to use it. You can roll your own. The thing that you really miss out on when you roll your own, when you're talking next-gen firewalls, is you can go do that and not have to go upgrade to anyone, is really the back end that powers the features. And so we'll get into why that is, but almost every feature on here is powered by some back-end service that you have to have a subscription to. So next-gen features are powered by things like databases that have virus definitions, that have attack signatures, that have categorization lists. And that's not something that is just free and available in a very robust, constantly evolving form. And so that's really when you upgrade and you start enabling these features, that's really the power that it's going to provide you. All right, before I get into the meat of things, does anybody have any questions?
Yeah, I'm Jim, I'm from the Humane Society. I don't think I've ever purchased a firewall software product.
Okay.
I've trusted that my Windows 2012 server software that all the computers network through, and the Windows Defender that comes in all the Microsoft products are doing the trick. And so far, we haven't had any real problems. So, I guess, how necessary is it to go out and buy a separate software program for firewall?
What you would generally do in this case is you would buy a physical hardware, and so, kind of what you're getting at is, hey, I've already got host firewall on, right? I've got my Windows firewall
I've
turned
trusted
on,
that they're built
right?
in, kind of.
And so from that level, that is enough for a lot of situations and a lot of people. And you'll see when we talk about these features. So if you talk about maybe a traditional firewall, that might have been enough. But when you jump up to some of the things that next-gen firewalls will do, Microsoft doesn't necessarily provide that, or at least not at a real basic level for their features. Now, if you're a small shop and you have a small footprint, maybe it's no concern, right? You may be good to go. But if you're hosting a website, if you've got something out there on the web, you probably have there is some benefits you can get from doing this.
Okay.
A lot of it though is just kind of having that visibility of what's going on. Maybe you've had no problems, maybe there is stuff going on that you don't see, and it's just really hard to tell.
Well, we did, somebody, a couple years ago, somebody did, apparently was using our server to send out messages. We had a visit from the FBI and the military.
Yeah,
And they
that's not good.
monitored us for several months and nothing came of it, but, I wanna be basically safe. I don't need, but, we're a nonprofit, we can't spend a whole lot.
Yeah, that's gonna be the biggest trick, is kind of figuring out what's the right solution for you. And probably everybody here, you all got different shops, and if you're under, some kind of government standard, 800, 141 standards, you're gonna have a lot higher standards to deal with. If you have a really sensitive shop that you do, banking and direct Department of Defense stuff, you're probably gonna, a lot of the features I talk about are probably gonna be something you are gonna wanna look at, or even be required to do. But if you're just a small nonprofit, you don't really have anything web facing, you have your email maybe.
Well, and I question how good they are anyway, because my wife works for the Air Force, and her Social Security has been out there for a couple of years because of people who filed, for our tax returns and everything else.
Yeah.
So,
And it like I said, it's an evolving cat and mouse game, and a lot of small shops a lot of the stuff I'm going to talk about is kind of overkill for a lot of stuff. But it's good to know about it because, a lot of this stuff was not even on anybody's radar years ago. And so as time goes on, you're going to see more and more and more reason to go look at something you never even considered before, and maybe it's never right size for you to do some of this stuff, but maybe for some folks, maybe when you get an attack, right, you had something malicious happen and you want to say, okay, now's the time, right? A lot of times it's when you have a problem and when you get bit that you come back and say, okay, we're going to go and do this much more to make sure we're safe. It's a tough topic to talk about, from that perspective of what's the right size for you, for your business. So, and maybe there's some stuff you can take away from this, and maybe in the end you say, you know what, everything here is, I don't need to do that, I'll try not to scare you guys too much. But. All right, so talking about what are we actually trying to see and stop? What are these features I keep talking about? What's the power and the availability to do this stuff? So the number one thing, that one's got on the list, in no particular order of importance, is actually not the bad guys coming in as much as your people, or maybe not quite your people, going out your network. I mean, who here has a guest network? Who has guest Wi-Fi? Right? Almost everybody. How much do you protect that? How many people here have, a shop where you have a lot of people that come in part-time interns, no offense on them, but people who have not come in and are invested in your company necessarily. Maybe it's manufacturing, maybe maybe you run a sweatshop, I don't know. So there is that, and so we all have some level of policies, I assume, acceptable use policies, whether they're mandated or not. If you don't, maybe it's something to look into. When somebody signs in your, company, whether they're going through a guest Wi-Fi portal, whether they're, onboarding with employee handbook and signing documents, there's things that they promise not to do. But you know what? People still do those things. We've seen it. And maybe they're not even things that they're promising not to do. Maybe they're things that you just don't want them to do. You don't want to make them sign a 20-page document documenting every kind of website they can't go to, every kind of, transaction they can't have. So what the power is here, and when we get these features, I'll preface this a little bit with, a lot of these features can be purchased separately through different packages. You don't necessarily have to have a Next-Gen Firewall, and have them all on that system. They sometimes work in conjunction. You can buy, a way to take care of these things separately. I would say for probably most of the folks here, I don't think anybody here works for CareSource or the big guys, Kettering, a big company that could afford to break up their systems. Most of you guys run in a smaller shop. Having everything on one box, versus managing 5 or 6 different systems that don't necessarily talk together, that's a pain, let me tell you. correlating stuff, doing the forensics. It's doable, but if you're running a 1 or 2 man shop, it's not always feasible. So let's just say you have an employee and they're, not being malicious, they got their work done, and now what do? Well, I've got 3 more hours in the clock. I'm just sitting here, no one's watching. Can someone on your network go to Netflix and watch the movies? Is that okay that they do that? Right? If they go and cut your bandwidth out, it could be a problem. And so traditional firewalls, traditional systems, can't stop that. How do you stop Netflix? You know how many IPs are listed if you go search Netflix and try and, it's a cat and mouse game. They're always evolving. There's a bunch of different servers that can go to. People can get around that. And so, that's one way that someone can circumvent it. I had, previous experience that, I've seen just that. Someone has high bandwidth uses, what the heck are they doing? We went on, we pulled the data, we analyzed it, we looked, hey, something's going to Netflix, and what are they doing? As another thing, and I don't know if anybody here has felt it, we've had multiple customers have issues with Windows updates. And so what they'll do is, if you're getting a big, because these patches are getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and Tuesday comes and Microsoft releases a big Windows update, and now every computer on the domain wants to go and pull that big update down. Tuesday morning, no one's doing any work because completely pegged out your circuit. Nobody can get email, nobody can get to the web. If you got your phones running through it, maybe your phones are not, they're down for the day until somebody does something. We've had multiple customers in the past have a problem. We had to go, and it was a cat and mouse game, and people, what they were doing? Walking around the floor, shutting PCs down that were updating. Find the source, turn them off. We got to keep running business, and that's a real problem. And so we can go and limit that through this. So one of the ways we can do that is web filtering. What you'd have is a big list of URLs that are categorized, whether that's, bad stuff, adult content, whether that's, sports and gaming content. Maybe you don't want people looking at restaurants during the day. I've seen it before. There's different categories, and you can build categories depending on, and this can be per user. Maybe you got some guy that's, you want to, mostly it's per department, right, or per group of users. Hey, guests have this policy. Maybe my executives can do anything. Maybe my normal employees can do, a limited set. And so that's one way we can kind of enforce this. And we can also make sure there's, beyond just the normal categorizations. What if you get redirected to a page that's not the page it's supposed to be, right? Well, there's a way to go and say this is not a good page. Maybe this is not somewhere that you should be going because it's malicious. It's not just, you're just goofing off at work, but you're actually going somewhere that could be dangerous. We can block it. In the old traditional firewall world, in the old, other world, I'm not sure if Microsoft has anything built in, per se, on their products to go and say you can't go to these malicious websites, you can't search these, query these places that you shouldn't be going. We can do that. Also, application filtering, and so I was talking about Windows updates. Well, one thing you can do is you can not only identify some service, and you can get on a lot of these things, they're very, very granular. You not only can say Microsoft Windows, but you can say Microsoft Windows updates. I can say, hey, so-and-so, you can go to Facebook, okay? Because, right, Facebook, how much business value does it have? Well, actually, there's a lot of business value today. A lot of pages. Well, maybe you can go to Facebook. I'll let my marketing department go to Facebook, but they can't do Facebook apps. So they can't go download Farmville or whatever the heck the popular apps are these days during the day. And so you can get real granular with looking at those applications. Both of these services are largely fed by databases and services that are categorizing on the back end, because there's always new applications coming into the mix. Who knows what the next big tech app that everybody wants to use is? Who knows what hot websites are out there? And so that list has to constantly be maintained. And so that's where that subscription comes in. Sure, you might pay more money for one of these services, but you're really paying for somebody to go and have a team of people categorizing and making sense of what's out there so that you can say, hey, I don't want anybody to go to gaming. Well, what's gaming? Someone has to go make a list of what's gaming. Questions with that? The first big category. Anybody have any experience? People doing things they shouldn't be doing? No?
We've had issues with, we have laptops that go home,
Mhm.
so it's fine when you're on the corporate network, but when they go home.
Start doing stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there are systems that you can install clients on that tie with a lot of the products that you can actually have them filtered all the time. But usually the big, aside from breaking policy, is just someone's eating up my bandwidth. Somebody's potentially going to something that's malicious or liable, right? You know, you don't want to get FBI visit, right?
It was kind of fun, really.
In hindsight, though, right?
Yeah.
And so, in going to something malicious, maybe a system is compromised on the inside. Well, how do we even detect that? Say, well, I have antivirus. Can do it. You know what? It can, but not every virus, not every infection is picked up on day one or picked up easily. But a lot of times, what we can do is we can go, and these systems will go and look at traffic patterns going outbound. And so maybe you see, why is this server sending all these requests out? I mean, that is, you guys have probably heard of a lot of the DDoS attacks out there. That'll just, someone infects a bunch of computers by, they're gonna go and someone's clicking on files they shouldn't go, or devices that are getting compromised with, someone hacks into guesses the username password. And those systems will all come back to this, what they call control server. And that control server then, when somebody feels like they want to go attack, hey, this company just, said something bad about me, A classic example is site Krebs on security. Anybody read? So he's a security researcher, and a lot of good stuff he exposes there, but he went after somebody and was exposing them for doing these, botnets. And what they did is they turned on him, and they called thousands and thousands and thousands, 100,000s of these devices that were infected, and they just pummeled him with traffic. Completely took his site offline because it just overwhelmed it. And DDoS is a real thing these days. And if your systems on the inside are part of this, are infected, and they're sending specific patterns of traffic, they're sending tons of hello initiation traffics out there. How do you know, right? An antivirus might not catch that. We'll see it on the edge. The firewall will say, whoa, wait a minute, that's not good. Hey, they're going to this known command and control server. That's not good. And so there's things that, a traditional antivirus may eventually catch, but maybe not on day one, maybe only because the system is attacking certain times. Now, is having a compromised system on the inside and only being used to attack other people without, hurting your network per se, now if it overwhelms your bandwidth, but is that a bad thing to you? To a lot of people it probably is, but maybe not everybody. On the reverse side of that, you've got stuff coming from the outside, and this is what we're, the big point we were talking about earlier, attacks and scans on web-facing content, open ports. So if you have a website out there, I guarantee it's getting hit with something. Very personal example here is we just turned on IPS for, and we'll talk about IPS in a sec, from a subset of our websites, our legacy websites, and I'll show you what that report shows. Pulled that from just this morning, just over a 1 hour period of time of what it caught and stopped. But there is constant traffic scanning ports. Hey, what's open that I can exploit, right? Because there's a big list, evolving list out there, somewhere that says these are bad, these are ports we can exploit. It's known. If you hit this particular port with this particular type of packet, it's going to cause damage. It's going to, one of those things is what they call is it a redirection attack or a?
Cross site.
No, so if you hit a certain port with a certain TCP packet size, the data will come back like exponentially higher. And so that's one way that these DDoSes work is you send, a 10-bit packet in, and you get back, 128K, and you do it again, and it just goes, and it goes, and it goes, and that all this data is just coming back to somewhere that it shouldn't be coming back to. And those kind of things that they scan. You know, there's always looking for. We constantly are seeing what we call brute force attempts, where someone's just going in and if you got a web site or you know, an RDP server out on the internet that your employees can hit and log into, you're having a username and a password field right there. If someone sees that force open, they're going to try username password, and they're just going to go through this huge list of common usernames, common passwords, hit them until they get in. Now, if you're following good password, you're never going to get it locked in, but you can see that stuff's always happening. We see it all the time here. You know, anything you open up, there's vulnerabilities. Constantly, even if you're constantly patching your Apache and your MySQL and you're keeping all that up to date, there's always that lag time, right? There's always sites, from experience, there's always sites out there that can't quite update, right? Your developers say it's not ready to update, right? I don't want to upgrade it because I don't know what it's going to do to the site, or maybe you do upgrade it, roll back. And so for that time period, you're sitting vulnerable, you know. We have some real old stuff that I'd show you. I pulled this morning. So let me blow this up. So this was just over a small period of time on our Linux legacy web hosting. Has IPS turned on just for a subset of web servers we host right here on data center. We turned it on a few months back, and we used to get these calls. So I'm on call, you know, 24/7. When something happens, I'm getting paged. Some of you guys know it. I'll email you in the middle of the night. Hey, your stuff's down. But when we went and before we turned this on, we would get woken up in the middle of the night for high load, high CPU on these web servers. What's going on? Always someone's hitting that web server real hard, hacking it, getting into it. Maybe it's compromised and it's blasting emails out. And so we'd get those pages. We turn this on, haven't had a single page since after hours for it. And we have some, you know, some customers that we still get pages for because they aren't behind this yet. And so if you look, you know, just from our web hosting environments, just this morning, this is just from like an hour, I just of this earlier this morning, SQL injection, 810 attempts to SQL inject. Malicious shell, 600 attempts. Yep. All these different botnets wrote code execution, 100 attempts. You can see that's just from a small hour this morning on DataYard's little footprint of our Fusion and web hosting. That's only, you know, maybe 20 IPs. And these are not even any of the big sites we host. This is just the people paying, you know, for hobbyist sites and small business sites and stuff that sit on this platform. Okay, so what is an IPS? Well, put IDS in here. IDS is intrusion detection. So that detects things, doesn't do anything about them, it alerts you, it says something's wrong. An IPS, prevention, is actually going to stop them. What you saw here was IPS, stopping things. What it basically, high level, does is it has this big database of signatures. And so if SQL injection, there's a certain way that SQL injection works. There's certain, you know, things in the packet people will see that don't look right? It could be off, right? The remote code execution. Things that it shouldn't see, it categorizes those, and it finds, you know, hey, if the packet has this in it, if there's this command in this packet, it's bad, and then it ranks it as high, medium, low, and the system, depending on how you tune it, will say, nope, SQL injection, don't allow it, don't allow cross-site scripting, don't allow all these things to happen. But you have to have that back-end categorization of, you know, signatures of bad stuff. And so that applied inside outside is going to notice those things. When someone goes and is going to a command and control file, when somebody's sending out a TCP SYN plug, when somebody's doing these bad things that it's catching here, it's going to catch them. And this is a constantly evolving signature list. It's constantly getting downloaded on most of these systems from some central cloud. You know, the big guys have teams. and they hire, I forget, Cisco had, I think it's Talos is Cisco's particular flavor of their team, and they all have teams, and there's security research experts, and they just sit there and they look for these signatures and they categorize them and they get all this data aggregated from everybody running the service. Hey, what am I seeing? What am I seeing? What am I seeing? Oh, we know what that is, and they're going to constantly update that list, and that list is going to get pulled down to some device, and anytime you see something like that, it's going to block it. Because I can probably almost guarantee you there's stuff that we're not catching that's not even categorized today, that maybe is not doing anything, but maybe it is doing something. Maybe it will do something. Next big thing is how I even get compromised in the first place. Well, a lot of times, it's unfortunately not a technology problem. Sort of phishing, spear phishing, it's getting worse and worse. People are impersonating. Heck, I get calls on my phone all day now from numbers that aren't real numbers. They're just someone's hacking those numbers. Hey, I can change the number that my phone number comes in. You see this all the time with emails. People are now going and changing, and you know what? They're sending emails as your president or CEO saying, hey, can you go and get some Amazon gift cards and send me the code? I want to give them out to customers. That's a real thing. We see that all the time, and it's extremely, extremely hard to stop things like that. And a lot of it is just training your folks, and maybe that's a good idea. At some point, we'll have some training that, how do you even train people to avoid these things? So if someone calls in, don't give them information. It should be a very simple security thing. Verify if someone asks you for something. If you see a link or a file that you're not expecting or seems off, you don't touch it. I just read a good story. I think you sent out, Dave, about Russia was able to get into the power grid. Well, how did they hack into the power grid, right? Well, you know how they did it. They didn't go after the big government, Department of Energy and the big providers. They went after little mom and pop excavating companies and contractors who were digging ditches for the company. You know what they did? Their systems were not protected because they assumed we're a small fry, we're a small shop, it's me and my wife and I got a couple of buddies, driving diggers. How am I don't need to protect myself from what? Oh no, they were getting in, they were hacking an email from the guys and sending out links. Hey, can you look at this? Can you look at my resume? Hey, can you sign this contract? I got a new contract for you on what do we use? DocuSign. New DocuSign available. But it wasn't a real DocuSign. They were clicking the link. He was sending it out to other contractors and to people at the energy companies. They would click that link. It would redirect to a site with bad code on it, infect the system. Now they're in control of the system on the network of a contractor, of another contractor, of an energy company. Uh-oh. One step. So having those files and links, they mostly come in email, but they could come through file downloads, right? Anytime you go to a Dropbox or anywhere, DocuSigns, there's bad stuff. People even send bad links, through just about anything you could send, something. Email's the biggest one. Say, well, what about my spam filter? Can it catch those? Well, mostly spam filters aren't looking at that level of the emails unless you turn those features on. You have advanced spam filtering. So what Next-Gen Feature Set is antivirus. I have antivirus. I have it on all my systems. But does that antivirus scan things? And does it hurt to have it in depth in two places? Because we want to look at it at the edge when it comes in. We want to scan it and take a peek at it and say, hey, does that URL, does that executable match, right? You've all probably pulled down documents and sat there. Scanning. Okay, now it's available. What is it doing? Well, it's going and looking and deciding, is that link, is that executable bad? Is it in a database somewhere? And this is also powered by a subscription service. There's a virus definition, so same as your antivirus. And it's gonna go and match all that stuff, take a look at it, and quarantine it if it's bad. A new feature, and this is an advanced feature, and most people have probably, this is not applicable for you, is sandboxing. And sandboxing is kind of like the latest deal, and so antivirus is great, but antivirus has to have the executables and the links and everything are already categorized and looked at. What sandboxing says is, hey, I see a file coming in, and I don't know what it is. So traditionally it would say, well, it's not listed as bad, so I'll assume it's good, right? Because if not, you're going to be getting a lot of stuff blocked on your network. Also, what sandboxing does, pretty cool, is it takes that link, that file, spins up a virtual machine, goes and puts that file and opens it, executes it, and it looks and says, what the heck is this doing? And it goes and it will look at, you know, my registry, it'll look at certain places that could be compromised, and you know, determine, is this good, is this bad? So it kind of is an on-the-fly virus definition checker for a lot of things. Usually sandboxing is something that you have to have additional resources. It will put some lag in there. I think the standard is like, it may add a couple minutes of time. So if you have an email that's coming in with a file that needs analyzed on it, that email may have some lag time before it gets to you. But what's the price of security, right? If you can ensure that it's not going to do any damage to anything.
Ryan, so where's that name come from? Sandbox, what does that mean?
What's that?
The name sandbox.
Sandbox.
what's the
So
significance?
in the IT world, sandbox is like a term we use for like playground. Like if I want to go and do a lab, like I want to go test some things out, I'll take systems that are not sitting in that data center running customer equipment and live websites, and I'll come off in a cordon off little area, and where I can't do any damage, and I'll go try things out. And if I break it, no big deal. And so what it's basically doing is I don't know why they chose the sandbox term, but I guess it's kind of, hey, I'm gonna go try this thing out, and I'm gonna run this thing on a simulated desktop. You know, it's gonna basically spin up a new Windows 10 desktop, open the file, see what it does.
Thanks.
Any questions about any of the features? New stuff for a lot of you guys, or is this just, I know this, I've heard these presentations before.
Is the
Little-
antivirus still worth it?
On the edge?
On the desktop?
I think it is because if you think about it, this is going to protect stuff coming in and out on the network. But if you have computers, who's to say someone doesn't put a USB drive in? Who's to say someone doesn't go home and pull a virus, right? This is only going to protect on a firewall unless you have them integrated. You got to have a client in order to protect the desktop itself.
But is that still, is the antivirus that you install on third party better than Microsoft's built-in?
Well, from a Microsoft perspective, you're probably best off with something like, you know, Defender's fine, perfectly fine for Windows. We've been running a FortiClient, and so that integrates with our FortiGate firewalls. And so the beauty is you kind of have that centralized place where all the data is. You can have synced policies on both. You got extra features, and so really what you're buying is if you go and put Defender, because there's no reason you shouldn't run Defender, right? If you're not running something else, I wouldn't say necessarily go get definitely not like a Kaspersky, but like a Semantic or something, and then maybe have a different antivirus. If you're running Cisco Firepower, consider running AMP, right? AMP for endpoints. Consider running something that integrates if you're going to run this feature one. Or maybe you run two different ones, because different companies have different databases. Maybe they'll catch things in tandem. Oh, well, this one's not quite classified here, and that one's classified there. So it's kind of a matter of looking at the products and seeing what they can do and how they function together. I think there's certainly a lot of value in defense in depth. You know, sometimes it's like, oh, we turned on a really good firewall, let's just not turn it off on our hosts. Maybe that's fine for what you do and what policies you have set up. Maybe you run the reverse. Maybe you have all these firewalls on your hosts and the antivirus on your hosts, and you say we don't want a firewall on the edge. But I say, if security is of concern to you going forward, you should consider in depth, right? Because traditionally the firewall's a fence, if you think of it that way, kept things out and in, but people can easily get into your fence. They can jump over it, they can tumble underneath it. And so as we go forward, maybe we'll see evolutions where there's less and less of this, but I think in the current security landscape, you're best off protecting yourself in multiple ways. Every different product has different things that it excels at, and it can catch and it can't catch. And you can build a solution that takes all these things together and can do everything that you care about, fantastic. All the power to you. You know, that's why the features are there. Now, my take on Next-Gen is for mostly small shops that don't have the effort to do this and don't want to integrate with 5 different vendors and don't want to manage all these different systems. If you can get it all bundled together, you get a lot of power with having that, you know, a lot of places call it that security fabric. And being able to have them talk to each other and have the reporting that you can pull reports in the same way from the same place and they look the same way, so when your CEO asks for a report, you're not giving them like different reports that look different things and, oh, well, what about this thing? Well, and you got to do forensics and tie all the data together at all the different places. And if you got a security team, you know, great. For us that don't. So you kind of get into what can everybody do? Question?
Yeah, so we see that, you know, there's like 600 attempts and 800 attempts. Obviously, there's a lot of bots and automated programs that are scanning and so on and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
In your experience, is there a way to distinguish these bots versus somebody who's actually at the other end of the keyboard purposely trying to get in? Or do they look exactly the same?
It's so increasingly hard these days. And I just read an interesting article where they were basically saying, and certain statistics are saying over 60% of internet traffic is fake today, meaning it's bot generated, meaning, you know, it's not real people. And so we're getting to this point where sometimes it's even hard to tell, and sometimes real people are being classified as bots, right? Like, you know, that's the whole thing of the CAPTCHAs. That's a good way to try and, you know, but if you are looking at this, I don't know, there's not an easy way to tell to look at those attempts. You can try and trace it back, but generally what you'll find is it's a big wormhole and trying to figure out who, right? Because you only have so much visibility, and as you go up the stack, you know, you can see this belongs to Time Warner Cable. Well, Time Warner Cable's not going to tell you who this IP address belongs to, right? You can look at geolocation services. Another interesting article I read that basically said geolocation is very unscientific, and basically there's been some instances where they had put the geolocation, right? You guys know what geolocation databases are. So an easy way is you can go and look at where things are assigned. So we actually can do a really good job of saying these IPs are from Russia, these IPs are from China, these IPs are from South Africa, these IPs are from the US. We've actually turned that on our web hosting to know we don't want any, this is hobbyist sites, we don't want anything outside of the United States or Canada to touch this. Easy. There's minor exceptions that come in. I've had situations before, my experience that someone will use an IP address. It was Missouri's State Department of Taxation. We did a big GeoIP block by hand, and their site just happened to fit in that block. Why they had a China IP on their site, I don't know. It was the legit site. Maybe they were using some hosting provider, maybe it was an IP that was misclassified. Those are corner cases. But when you're talking about geolocation, the next level where you say, well, what address is this smartphone at, right? What address is this web server at? That's very hard to do. And what they had found was, you know, they had picked this random location, which was basically smack dab right in the middle of the United States. And for any device that they didn't have a good location on, they had like, it was like this location plus a 300, 400, 500 mile radius. And so this poor lady lived on this farm in Kansas, middle of the country, was getting law enforcement, FBI, private detectives, people were coming banging on her door saying, my phone says it's here, the geolocation says it's here, give me back my phone, and like we're threatening her. So you have to be very careful when you look at, you know, those kind of things to say, okay, how precise is this? How real is this? Because you could say, well, this is from the United States. It's probably not, you know, someone shouldn't use the site. It's a cat and mouse game that I think as the tools improve, we'll get better. But as the tools improve, the bad actors will get better. The nation states are hacking. You know, people just looking to make some money. Kids just right? Gamers just out there to having a grudge, right? And they want to use a program to infect a bunch of computers because they have a bad day.
And hackers will leapfrog from server to
server,
and they might
They
leapfrog into
they
another
mask
server
they
in the
mask their
United States.
IPs, which is where another difficulty is traditional firewalls can block IPs really good and ports. They don't know if they're spoofed. You can spoof your IPs. You know that. That's very, very, very common is to spoof IPs. And so we put some protections on our network to say these IPs, there's a list of like 3,000 IP blocks that say these are not assigned, these are bad. Anything we get from those bad ones, junk it. Just junk it. And so that's just, you know, being a good steward, but also a simple security thing you can do. There's no guarantee. I'm not going to give you a silver bullet for security, because if I could, I'd be somewhere else presenting probably to a different group of people making a lot of money. I'm gonna give you my experience and tell you what's out there good.
The money's not that good. Let me weigh in here. Chances are, you're asking two different things, and he's answering two different things, and they're almost overlapping. If it's an IP address, if it's an address that you can tell, okay, you can block that stuff off. If it's a specific behavior that you were asking, can you tell if this is somebody that's on there? By the time it promulgates out to these databases and our tools and stuff like that, chances are they're either automated or largely automated. They have to be kicked off by that. And it is the community of security researchers are working on trying to find exactly that those guys that you're talking about that are the edge. And the lag time between what they find in cases like Cerber out of Carnegie Mellon or any of these other guys that they do, is what is going to always be there. Right? You're always going to have that guy. But all of that noise that Brian's been talking about, the vast preponderance of that is automated or largely automated, or it wouldn't be a known signature. Right. So
Yeah.
I get most of that right?
Yeah, you're good. Yeah, and like a lot of it, and like I said, it's automated, and a lot of it's harmless. It really is.
The tools themselves, all the attack scripts and all that other stuff like that are largely
The
automated.
scanning and the little things are usually harmless, but there's enough bad in there that
Yeah, but if you can get a researcher that says that this is a known behavior and they promulgate on out, and that the lag time in there is not trivial.
Yeah.
Okay, it's days, weeks, months. It's not instantaneous. All this notion about 0-day stuff that makes
Right.
for great movies and stuff like
Yeah.
that. Okay, it's a lot of hard work on both sides. Okay, bad guys doing a lot of hard work. Good guys are doing a lot of hard work. You know, that for 0-day stuff. And all 0-day really means is the day that I found it.
Right, it means
It's
0-day is unclassified, and that's kind of where they try and play the sandboxing game, which has value, but it adds a lot of overhead and a lot of lag time.
Yeah.
And there is that lag time, and I think different products do different things. I think when we in-house we run Firepower and we run Juniper, or not Juniper, we run Fortinet and Firepower for our filtering. I think, I don't know what the Firepower time was, but it was much higher than like Fortinet's around like 5 minutes. Like every 5 minutes it's pulling down a new definition file. I want to say, otherwise it was taking longer to do that. So that is, even 5 minutes is pretty quick. That's still 5 minutes. That's a lot of time for someone to come in and if there's something else. And plus how much time to take someone to find that, to research it, to verify it around their team.
Right, and chances are if you're running 5-minute things, you've got somebody in a research team that's just morphing those things and doing permutation on that to expand out the signature. They're not live capturing brand new stuff
No.
and kicking it out every 5 minutes.
No.
Okay.
And speaking of 5 minutes, Ryan, that's how much
5
time I
minutes?
have left.
Yep, this is my last slide. And then questions. What can you guys do today? How much did that scare you? Scare you?
I was
So.
already scared.
Right. So if you have a traditional firewall, if you know you're running a traditional firewall, you're not running any of these features, see if it's worth it. What is your take on security posture? What are you looking to get out of security? How afraid are you? Have you been bitten before? Have you known people that have bitten before? Nothing you can do, and I know some places have this program. This is something that we're going to start probably doing at some point, is taking a firewall, the Next-Gen Firewall, transparently putting in front of your network and letting everything run through it and saying, what do we catch? What do we see? That's one way you can get visibility and see, is it something that I am seeing bad? Am I not seeing bad? I'm not sure who, I know for sure Fortinet will do that. I would imagine some other players will also do that for you guys. And if you decide, I do want some of these features, definitely something to have that conversation. If you say, no, not worth it, maybe it's worth it to look at your current firewall and say, let me look and see what's in there. Maybe I need to tighten it up a little bit. Maybe I need to lock it down. That's a great thing you can do. if you do have a Next-Gen Firewall, and let's see, if you're using features in it already, go analyze those features. Are you getting out of them what you think? Check your reporting. If you're not using features that you might want to use, turn those features on. Turn them on monitor only on day one. That's what we do when we roll up new features. Put them monitor only, look at the reports. Am I catching stuff I shouldn't be? Because the last thing you want to do is turn a bunch of features on and then take your network to a crawl because people, your custom apps are doing something that's, legit that looks bad. So take advantage of it. Unfortunately, a lot of the features for things may be paid, so it's just reality of do you want to do that? Do you want to pay that price? If you don't have a firewall, should you have one? It's up to you guys. I'd say it's really a matter of what your policies are, what your footprint is, how much do you think you need. All right, questions?
Okay, I'll ask, I am a DataYard customer.
Mhm.
I manage services here.
Mhm.
They're kind of a one-off thing. I've got my own cage back, I got
Mhm.
my stuff locked up. It is probably more appropriate to the after meeting
Mhm.
to where I would ask you, what services do I currently have on tap, and what's the delta between this
So-
and the quote-unquote
Mhm.
next generation firewall? Because the next generation firewall is, as you mentioned, is not a matter of the appliance, it's a matter of the features that are on or not.
You need the appliance first, and then you'd add the features to that.
So I would need to know, I know I had some old Barracuda thing in there.
You would need some firewall, and you're actually on my short list to migrate. You're on a traditional today. You will be migrated to a next-gen capable firewall whenever you're ready.
Yeah.
And then at that point, we can start figuring out what features are
Yeah,
important
because
to
the
you.
reason I'm here is because Dennis told me I need to find this stuff out because my firewall's too old.
You will be updated very shortly. So I don't think any of the rest of you have hosted firewalls with us. But we're going through a process of changing all of our traditional firewalls to next-gen capable firewalls, so we can start turning features on for those people who want them.
And for us, just to answer at least an earlier question as to why you would do this, especially for this gentleman, young man there down in the table. For us, it's a compliance thing. We are in the kind of work that we have statutory and regulatory compliance. The way to prove compliance is to sit there and take the compliance checklist and sit there and say, this is my configuration checklist, and yes, I'm looking at the logs every such and such. And that's what gives you compliance, because we don't have a security staff per se, other than what we get from Ryan and from Dennis and the other guys that are running around. So that's the reason that it is for us. It's not because we are doing a lot of really cool stuff. We're not building really cool apps or anything. I've got a mail server and I've got the most simple web page in the world. There's no interactive stuff whatsoever. But in order to just be compliant, I'm gonna be putting money into this thing this year for that and no other reason. Not because I'm trying to solve any of these problems, because I have to stay compliant.
Yeah, we see a lot of the ones we've been doing lately are very much compliance driven. But I think as we turn things up, hopefully we can provide reporting to you to say, hey, you did this for compliance, but you know what? All this other stuff here, we just blocked it, we stopped it,
Yeah. Oh.
And definitely it's an advantage. A lot of people are hesitant to step into upgrades, or when they do, maybe they were sold on something and they really didn't take advantage of what's available and realize it. And that's kind of my hope here, is I show you guys what the heck. Let's demystify the sales talk and just say what exactly situations can we solve with this. Whether you go out and talk to, a Palo Alto rep next week and they sell you some big bill of goods, you kind of have a notion of, well, what's out there, what's available, what can I do, and not just be taken for a ride. And okay, this is actually what we want, because the important thing is not what's available, but what do we want. So by presenting, here's the problems, maybe they don't have no bearing on your business, but maybe they do have bearing. You can kind of pick and choose what's important to you guys for security. What have you seen? What are you curious? And then you can take that to some provider and say, hey, what can you do for me? Because this is what I want to do. Whether that's directly to the vendor, whether that's the third-party consultant, whether that's a hosted solution like ours, there's a lot of different ones you can do.
All right, we want to be really sensitive to your guys' time constraints and not keep it past 1. But Ryan and I will stick around for any questions you might have if you have available time and want to talk more. But otherwise, we thank you very much for coming to this first session of our Databites. We're gonna have one in February, I believe. And that one's gonna be a little different. We're gonna walk through Jurassic Park and look at all their security flaws. And talk about that. So, why you don't want to do Jurassic Park blunders. So, thank you all very much for